You are listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxshall, in which I chronicle my life and attempts to become a professional writer by, doing some writing daily, hopefully. Hello, it is Wednesday, the 31st of July 2024. You're listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer. And I was hoping to do a little bit like what I did yesterday. So I'm in Sydney today. So yesterday morning I was in Singapore, today I'm in Sydney, and what I was hoping to do was wander around somewhere that had a bit of ambient noise that would be quite interesting to listen to, rather than just the sort of dull background noise of being in a hotel room, which is ultimately what you've ended up with. But it's extremely windy outside, and I didn't think it would work. So I decided to do the podcast today from here. However, I may attempt to do tomorrow's podcast because I'm in Sydney until early tomorrow morning. So I might, if the weather's better, try and do something outside in Sydney for tomorrow's. But we'll see how it goes. So I haven't done any writing since we last spoke. I intended to, but I've been quite busy and working quite hard. But the intention is absolutely still there. Again, I wanted to do some today before I recorded this podcast, but I've just been on this 6-mile walk around Sydney, went to Mrs. Macquarie's Chair in the Opera House and Darling Harbour. So a nice big long walk, which I've really enjoyed. But it's left me absolutely exhausted, and I'm realistically going to have a little sleep. And I could have actually done this podcast later, because although it's nearly 5 o'clock in the afternoon here in Sydney, this is a UK-based podcast, sort of. So I always try and put the show out at a time that's relevant in the UK. And it's only 8 o'clock in the morning, so I could literally have done this in 12 hours' time, and it would still come out on the day I intended it to. But never mind. Now, talking of which, I don't know if I mentioned it yesterday, because I did 2 takes of yesterday's podcast, and I can't remember if I said exactly the same things in both. But I have recorded this month, I think I worked it out as 20 out of a possible 31 days. And that's not bad. It's still, nearly 2/3. But I have decided that I think one of the things that made me so motivated early on was trying to make this a daily thing, come hell or high water. And one of the things I used to do for the days where I was genuinely too tired to do a podcast was pre-record one. I'd literally have an emergency podcast sitting there. And if there came a day, and it would often be a day where I've landed in from a long flight and I'm really tired and I just didn't have the energy, I would stick out a podcast I'd already recorded. So one went out every day. And it's a habit that I'm out of, and it's a habit that I need to get back into. So yes, later today, I'm going to put together an emergency podcast, possibly a couple of emergency podcasts. And what I'm going to try and do is record one show every day in August. Get back to what I was effectively trying to do at the beginning. And if that means acknowledging there will be some days where I'm going to struggle, record something in advance just to chuck out, just to be in the habit of doing it. So that's what I'm going to do, yeah. And that means this is show 83. I rarely mention the show number because it's not really that relevant. So that's still pretty impressive. This is my 83rd podcast. And that also means if I do this as often as I hope to do, if my maths is right, the 17th of August, if I do it every day, will be show 100. And that's pretty impressive. And I mean, at six minutes each, and actually the majority of them are slightly longer than that, but at 6 minutes each, that means that's 600 minutes or 10 hours of this nonsense. And there's actually realistically more than that, because I usually go 7, 8, 9. I think there's even one that reached 15 minutes, although that was at the beginning, and I try not to do that anymore. So that's kind of what I'm going to try and do in August, a show every day. And it should be easier because I've got one of my part-time weeks in August, so I've got a total of 11 consecutive days off once I get home from this trip on the 4th. So I'm then not working again until the so first day off is the 5th, last day off will be the 15th, I think. So I'm not back at work until the 16th or something like that. So there's no excuse not to. Yeah, so that's my plan. As for the rest of today, I have been awake all night. I did get a couple of hours of sleep when we arrived in Sydney, but Sydney's one of those irresistible places where it feels churlish not to do something, because, I'm on the far side of the world. I get about 30 hours here, so it seems kind of rude to come all this way and then just sleep. So I haven't. I guess I've just been on this long walk. One of the things that I have done, which I'm quite pleased about, is I've probably mentioned them a couple of times before. There is a bookshop in my hometown called Suddenly on Sheaf Street, and it's a lovely independent bookshop. Great customer service, lovely staff. I haven't bought a book on Amazon since I discovered them. One of the things I promised I would do is they've got these nice tote bags with their logo on, and I did promise that I would try and get a photograph of somewhere iconic for them with the tote bag. And I meant to do San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge and just didn't. So today, one of the reasons I did the long walk that I did was it took me out to a place called Mrs. Macquarie's Chair. And Mrs. Macquarie's Chair is within the Botanical Gardens, and it's on this kind of curved bit of bay. There are several points along there, or there's a long stretch along there, where you can get one photograph which takes in both the Opera House in the foreground, well, sort of foreground compared to the Harbour Bridge, which is more in the background. And I wanted a picture basically of me with a tote bag and the Opera House and the Harbour Bridge in the background, and I got it. So I've emailed that off to the bookshop, and hopefully they will use it on their social media in the near future. But I've been promising them that I'd do something like that for a couple of months. So I'm very pleased that I've finally got round to doing that. And I'd also like to thank my colleague who actually took the photograph, because I did take a little sort of selfie stick with a stand thing on it, but it was much easier to have a human being taking the photograph for me. Anyway, rabbited on for 7 minutes now. I'm not going to say much more. I'm going to have a doze soon. I won't be able to sleep all night. My sleeping pattern's going to be weird here, because it always is. But my intention is to try and do a podcast from outside tomorrow if it's not too windy. And maybe do a bit of writing before then. So thank you very much for listening. I do love coming to Sydney. I wish I got to spend more time here. And I will talk to you tomorrow on the 1st of August, and hopefully the first month where I record a show every day. Thank you for listening. Take care. Bye-bye. You have been listening to The Diary of a Wannabe Writer, presented by Richard A. Boxall. Thank you for tuning in to my random ramblings, and if you'd like to know more about me or my projects, visit my link tree at linktr.ee/Richard Wright, capital R, capital W. Thank you for listening.